There is absolutely no way that cryptocurrencies can ever fulfill that role. They're far too volatile to be used as money, and they don't have the pedigree of having been used as money in the past. That is necessary for them to be used as money, those two conditions, and they fail completely.
Start investing in gold and silver at sdbullion.com today and join over 35,000 precious metals investors who have made the switch to the lowest gold and silver prices in the industry. SD Bullion recently claimed a spot on the prestigious Inc. 500, making them one of the fastest growing bullion companies in the United States. With low bullion prices and over-the-top customer service, SD Bullion is setting the standard for precious metals transactions. Visit www.sdbullion.com today. Start saving on every precious metals purchase you make.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah Johnson with silverdoctors.com, and with us today is Alasdair MacLeod from goldmoney.com. Alasdair, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for asking me.
All right. Now, I'd first like to discuss how Trump right now is working with Democrats. He agreed on a deal to raise the debt limit and fund the government through mid-December. And a lot of people were shocked about this because, he was going against his own party here. And can you tell us a little bit about your perspective on how, the debt limit just seems to continue to be raised over and over?
Well, the debt limit, I think, since the last war has been raised over 70 times. So, in a sense, we shouldn't be surprised that yet again this is a problem. And we shouldn't be surprised that it will be yet again a problem at some stage in the future. I think buying 3 months is sensible in many respects, particularly given that money has to be diverted for the tragedy in Texas, and presumably the upcoming Treasury problem that we're going to have with this current hurricane in Florida. So it does make some short-term sense. But having said that, President Trump has basically if you like, gone against his own party, because his party, the Republicans, should be negotiating this as a whole with the president. Basically, what he's done is he's just cut loose and done a deal, if you like, with the Democrats. So this is the sort of thing that is hardly likely to endear him to congressmen and senators. But having said that, I think it does make sense. But it doesn't deal with the underlying problem. I mean, all he's done is by 3 months' time, as you state.
Definitely. I mean, it seems like whenever the debt limit issue gets raised again, it seems just like a silly issue to me, because it's not like there's really any question. It's not like the politicians are actually going to not raise the debt limit. It seems just like political theater to me. What is your perspective?
Well, I think the original context of this was that Congress and the Senate would control the expenditure of any president. And I think it had its origins in the concept of sound money. So in that sense, I'm fully I really do appreciate the idea that there should be a limit on what the administration can spend. But having said that, that's not quite the world we live in. The world we live in is one which socializes taxes. It moves taxes from the rich to the poor. It moves taxes from taxpayers to anyone who the government is mandated to supply money to. And on top of that, of course, it moves money from taxes to the defense, homeland security, and all the rest of it, all for very good reasons on paper, defending the nation and all the rest of it. So the idea of sound money, I'm afraid, doesn't really accord with the way politics is at the moment. I'm a great believer in sound money, but I'd be the first to recognize that's not the world we live in.
Do you think Trump is doing this because of Hurricane Harvey and Hurricane Irma, coming soon? Or do you think it seems like Trump has kind of, some people would call him like an outsider, and it kind of makes sense that he's, breaking party lines and siding with Democrats if he realizes this is just, in the world we live in, as you were saying, it is just seems to be a little bit ridiculous that we have this debt limit, because how things are right now, we don't really have an option of not raising the debt limit.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I think the problem that the Republicans have is they expect the the president to be tribal, and that is to work, if you like, with the elders of the tribe. And Trump is too independent for that. He's not. His background isn't politics. His background is business. And basically, as a businessman, he will do whichever deal legally which suits his book. So he's a bit of a square peg in a round hole, I think, in that sense. And I'm sure that this is a problem that will occur again. But going back to the justification over the first hurricane and now the second and potentially a third, I think in a sense that's an excuse. Something more sensible should happen rather than this repeated change and change and change, raising the debt limit or postponing the debt limit. And having said that, we're nowhere near, as far as I can see, any tax reform and how that tax reform is going to reduce the government deficit. I mean, let us assume for a moment that tax reform is going to be seriously debated. It's hardly going to work with the idea that it's going to be immediate. The first thing that would happen is that if the US Treasury collects less tax, as it were, in order to stimulate the economy, then the deficit is going to go up before it comes down. We're going to have to just take it on trust that it will come down. And to some extent, I think that the idea that that suddenly, if you cut taxes, you're going to get economic recovery in the United States. I don't think that's quite necessarily true. Obviously, taking money out of the private sector is bad news for business as a whole. So the less you take out, that is good. But there are other headwinds against the economy, which make it unlikely, really, to recover that much, in my view. Not least the isolationist stance which President Trump and the Republicans take when it comes to trade.
Now, you were talking about how ideally we should have gold and silver as money. And you recently wrote an article about cryptocurrencies, and a lot of people are seeing cryptocurrencies as good as gold and silver because they're limited in supply. There can only be so much Bitcoin mined, and there are a lot of similarities between Bitcoin and gold. But what is your perspective? I know that you've said that cryptocurrencies are not money and never will be.
Yes, well, people, as you point out, have emphasized the tight supply side of particularly Bitcoin, and comparing this, if you like, with the tight supply side of extra mined gold on the above ground gold stocks. But the difference is actually quite simple. Gold has a history of being money that goes back as long as men moved from barter to using an intermediary good, if you like, as a store of value between producing goods and exchanging goods. This is never the case with Bitcoin and the cryptocurrencies. They cannot be money. It is a precondition for money, apart from the historical use of money and the fact that that money has some value doing something else. There is absolutely no way that something that is as volatile as Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever can act as money. Who's going to accept a Bitcoin as money in return for a transaction? I mean, basically no one. What they will do is they might take Bitcoin on the basis that they will hold it to speculate, but that's very different from using it for money. It is not money. It's as simple as that. So what we have, and this was the thrust of my article, is that we have a very interesting laboratory experiment in the madness of crowds. This is a bubble, and it's a bubble which is so theoretical. There's nothing other than, if you like, bubble theory involved in this. And I suspect that this bubble will go a long way before it's popped. Government can pop it, but basically for government to pop it, they have to have international agreement. The Chinese came up with a sort of agreement, if you like, or sort of legislation I would expect to pop this bubble, the cryptocurrency bubble. But that's just China. It's not America. It's not elsewhere in Asia. It's not in Europe. So you can see that one country can't actually stop this. But sooner or later, I suspect that if it doesn't implode of its own accord, governments will come in and agree to instruct banks not to accept transactions which involve transferring money to or from cryptocurrencies. That would be the end of it. I suspect that that would take 4 or 5 years to happen. So the end of it is likely to be the traditional bubble gets so high that it just stops sustaining itself. But there are a lot of people who aren't involved, who can yet get involved and to buy into this dream. So this is why I think it's just such a fascinating study in the psychology of bubbles. It is pure and simple, but don't tell me it's money. It's not money. And it's no comparison to gold or dollars or euros or anything else.
Now, if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying is that Bitcoin isn't money because it's not a medium of exchange and you can't really use it many places. It's more for speculation. But that seems to be the way that Bitcoin is right now. But in the future, I mean, there's nothing stopping other places from accepting Bitcoin and it moving away from just being an instrument for speculation. What is your perspective?
Well, I mean, anyone who uses anything is free to use it how they please, as long as they do it within the law. I mean, you know, there are enthusiasts for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all the other cryptocurrencies who really do believe that these are money. But all I'm saying is that if you actually look at the theory of money and how money evolves, it ain't money. It's as simple as that. And on that basis, it's not going to be accepted widely as money. It never will be. It's far too volatile, and it doesn't have the origin, if you like, of having a value in something else. And if you look at the dollar, for example, now the dollar is an unbacked money, and most of it's produced by commercial banks in the form of bank credit. But there is at least that myth that the dollar originally was tied to gold. We know it's no longer tied to gold, but that is what originally gave it its value. Now, at some stage, people will wake up to the fact that the dollar isn't backed by anything, and the dollar will collapse in its purchasing power. Of that, I have absolutely no doubt. But whether this is next year or 10 years' time, we haven't a clue. But at least when I accept $1 from you because I have sold you something, I regard it as money. I regard it as something that I can use to purchase something else. There is absolutely no way that cryptocurrencies can ever fulfill that role. They're far too volatile to be used as money, and they don't have the pedigree of having been used as money in the past. That is necessary for them to be used as money, those two conditions, and they fail completely.
And you don't think before the, cryptocurrency bubble pops, you don't think cryptocurrencies can be less volatile and more stable in their price and that people won't accept them as money as much?
No, because, the way a bubble works is when it stops inflating, it deflates. And I can tell you the price of Bitcoin will go to zero. It's either going up or it's going down. And, when the bubble is over, it's not going to stay there, say, at $10,000 a Bitcoin or whatever level you think it might get to. It's not going to stay there as if nothing had happened. No, as soon as it's time to take profits, people will take profits. And as soon as it starts falling, people will take profits in mass. They will sell, and they will sell at any price in order to get out of something which actually just doesn't exist.
And I know that you mentioned how China is kind of restricting cryptocurrencies. China recently outlawed initial coin offerings. What is your perspective on what other countries could do also to restrict and pop the cryptocurrency bubble?
Well, as I said in my article, basically what China has done is what other countries can also do. But until you get an international agreement on this and implement it through the banking system by instructing banks not to accept payments that have anything to do with cryptocurrencies, you're not going to stop people participating in this bubble. And I would argue that this bubble isn't over yet because ordinary members of the public haven't really started playing it. It's still very much the preserve of people who are incredibly keen on cryptocurrencies, which is not the ordinary man in the street. When the ordinary man in the street starts playing, it's time to get out. And that, I think, is probably in terms of time not too far away.
Now, I'd like to move our focus to the precious metal markets. Since about the beginning of July, it seems like gold and silver have been increasing significantly. What is your perspective on what is driving the price right now?
I think the thing that's driving the price is more geopolitical than anything else. I think it's geopolitics that are giving us the timing. Basically, gold and silver measured in fiat currencies are extraordinarily cheap because the fiat currencies have inflated and inflated and inflated. While, to pick up on a point you made earlier, comparing gold with cryptocurrencies, the quantity of above ground stocks of gold have not increased by more than about 1.5% to 2% per annum. So there is definitely a mismatch there. The mismatch exists partly because Western central banks insist that gold is no longer money, even though they retain it on their balance sheet in the form of reserves. So when it comes to the timing as to how gold and silver are going to move, we know the direction. We know that's going to happen over time. But I think the timing is being brought forward by the geopolitics and the interaction between America and Asia. We've got a number of hotspots, and these are actually getting, I think, very, very hot. The first is obviously North Korea. And the second, which is a minor irritation as far as China is concerned, is Afghanistan. I really can't see why President Trump decided to send more military to Afghanistan. I mean, it's not going to do any good. The Afghanistan government are already coming to an agreement with the help of the Chinese, the Russians, the Indians, and the Pakistanis with the Taliban, and that country is going to progress. The reason that America is interfering in Afghanistan is quite simple, and that is they did the U.S. Geological Survey was done on Afghanistan, I think, in 2009, and it showed that there could be up to $1 trillion worth of precious metals there, along with rare earths and all the rest of it. So Afghanistan is, if you like, very much unexplored ground when it comes to commodity riches. And either that falls into the hands of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization members, or America tries to grab it for itself. But what's the point? I can't see how America can do it. And apart from anything else, what we've now seen is that China and Russia have now progressed their plans with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization to the point where it is becoming in their interest to do away with their dollar assets in return for independence from the dollar in terms of trade. And we're seeing this in the futures markets in Shanghai, where very shortly, by the end of this year, Iran, for example, will be able to cover its oil payments from China in yuan on the forward market, and it can match that forward contract. It will be able to match that forward contract with a sale of yuan in return for gold, again on the futures exchange, and take delivery of gold. So, suddenly we're seeing that all the people who are involved with that big Asian story are now getting into the position where they can actually begin to trade without the dollar. And gold is the link here. Very, very important. So when it comes to the timing on gold, I think we're actually quite close. I think the next thing to really watch for is when that yuan to gold contract, futures contract, actually goes live. And we expect to see that in the next few months.
All right. Well, we'll definitely be looking out for that. And once again, Alasdair MacLeod, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we let you go, did you want to share with the viewers any last thoughts you had and where they can find you online?
Well, any last thoughts? Nothing really. I think that the current situation is seeing a big shift away from America in terms of being the hegemony of the world towards Asia. And it won't be one state. It's China working with Russia, incorporating other nations. And they also have extensive ties into Brazil, Venezuela, Peru, all on the commodity side, maybe, commodity and energy. But one way and another, they are pulling away America's friends from America, and they will be doing that in Europe as well. And if anyone wants to read more about what I write an insight article for Gold Money, which is published on Thursdays around about midday Eastern time. So there's one actually in the works now. And I also do a market report on Fridays, which is published at about the same time on the Friday. And if you want to be sure of getting them, then I recommend you open a Gold Money account, and you can get an email on a regular basis, which will send the articles to your inbox.
All right, sounds good. Alasdair MacLeod, once again, thank you so much for your time today.
That was my pleasure. Thank you.